Today we're going to look at section 4.10a, quadratic calculator instructions. Our objectives are to be able to use a graphing calculator to find the important information about a quadratic function. So how do you type a quadratic equation into your calculator? Well, the first thing we want to do is go to y equals. So if you have your calculator turned on, if you go to the top left-hand button, you should see y equals. We're going to hit that button first. Now, if you have a bunch of stuff like highlighted, if you have other equations in, what you want to do is go down and you want to clear out all other equations. Okay, and if you ever have any of these plots turned on, you want to turn them off. So you're going to go up to plot 1, hit enter. You want to have none of them highlighted. So once it's clear, you want to enter in your own equation. So for us, we're going to use y equals negative, so make sure you hit this negative at the bottom, 0.25. The x is next to your alpha key, squared, plus 7x, plus 32. Once that's entered in, I can hit graph to kind of see some stuff. Now, the first thing you might want to do is we're going to start with this zoom button. Okay, I don't have this written down here, but if you want, write this in for your notes. Hit zoom, and there's a whole bunch of options. Zoom 6 gets you that 10 by 10 graph that you guys are used to seeing in class, where it goes 10 up, 10 down, 10 left, and 10 right. So that's going to give me this basic graph. So what I can actually see now is I can see my parabola going up, but I can't see anything else. Now I should know some things about this parabola. I know it's a downward facing parabola because my a value is negative. Okay, so it kind of looks like it probably does something like this, up, and then comes back down. So what we're going to have to do is change the window in order to see all the important parts. Now by important parts I mean we should see the vertex, we need to see the y-intercept, and the x-intercepts in order to usually solve and answer questions that we're going to be coming up in this chapter. So how are we going to do that? We're going to go to the window. Now window is right next to your y equals, so it's the second button up at the top. And if you notice, it goes from negative 10 to positive 10 on the x-axis, negative 10 to positive 10 on the y-axis. And the reason it says that is because we went to that zoom standard. If you've messed around with your window in the past, it could say something different. So we know we need to change this. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to think about what my equation was, and the easiest thing to change and to look at when it's in standard form is our y-intercept. Now we had a plus 32, that was our c value, so I know my y-intercept is a positive 32, so I'm going to go to my y max. Right now the calculator goes up to a height of 10. I know I need at least a 32, so I'm going to go even higher than that. I'm going to put 50 in, and then I'm going to go back to my graph, which is this right button, and then see what that changed. So now I can see my y-intercept. So now I know my graph goes here, it goes even higher than 50, and then it must curve back down. So because I can't even see the vertex, I know it's going to be quite a ways to the right before I have this parabola coming back down. So now I'm going to have to go back into my window and change a lot of the other values. Well, I know 50 wasn't high enough, so let's double it. Okay, I'm going to make it 100. Okay, so let's just, you can baby step it, you can change one number at a time to kind of see. So now that I've seen that, I can see that I'm definitely high enough, but now I have to go right more. And right would be my x max. Okay. Well, I know 10 wasn't enough, and if you look at the graph, I'm not even at the halfway point exactly. I'm probably getting pretty close. So let me go back to my window. Let's say quadruple it. Let me make it 40. Okay, just to give me some extra space, because you can always make these numbers smaller after the fact. So 40 seemed to be enough. I can see the y-intercept, I can see this, my two x-intercepts, and I can see the vertex. I'm actually going to give myself a little bit more space down at the bottom. So that means I want to have more in the negative y. So negative 10, because if you notice, I'm going from negative 10 to 100. I have a lot in the positive, not much in the negative. I'm going to make it say negative 40. Okay, I'm just going to give myself some space on either side. And now I have a nice parabola. Okay, and that's what you're going to need to do. That's sometimes the hardest part for students, is to be able to manipulate the window in order to be able to see your graph. Okay, and it's a slow process. So now, how do we actually find the value of this vertex if we want to use the calculator? Well, we're going to go to the Calculate menu, and that's this little yellow word right above the trace. So to get that, I'm going to hit my second button and then trace, and it's going to give me a bunch of options. The one we're going to use is either the minimum or the maximum. Because this was a downward facing parabola, my vertex is the highest point, or in this case, the maximum value. Okay, so when you do that, a cursor is going to appear. You have a couple of choices. you can actually move your cursor, and it's going to give you two questions. It's going to actually ask you three questions. One, the first one says left bound, which says give me a value to the left of where this is. Well, if you want, you can kind of put your cursor about where it is, and then we're right now at the point 13.93617, and then the y is 80.99, and so on. So you have a couple choices. I could actually move my cursor to the left and hit enter, and then move it to the right, or right now I'm about 14. So what I'm just going to do is make sure I enter a number that's less than that. So I'm going to say 10, and then hit enter. And it puts a point to the left of my vertex. Now it's going to ask, well, pick a point on the right. Well, if that was at 14, I'm going to pick a point that I know for sure is on the right. I'm going to pick 20. And then it puts a little mark. And then it's going to say guess. Okay. If you want, you can actually move your cursor to it, or you could just hit enter when it prompts you to guess. And it's going to think for a second, and then what it's going to do is going to tell me where that maximum value is. And it actually happens to be at exactly 1481. Now sometimes it'll have decimals, sometimes it'll be a nice exact number, but now it did all the work for us. It did the negative b over 2a, and then substituted it in, and then found the y value. That's what you guys would have done by hand, but this did it for you. So for our answer, our vertex would be at 14,81. Okay. Well, how do you find the x-intercepts? Well, here's an x-intercept to the left, and here's one to the right. Before, you'd have to use a quadratic formula or do some sort of factoring or complete the square. But now we're going to let the calculator do it. So I'm going to go back into my calculate, and that's actually the calc really stands for calculate. So I'm going to go second trace. And now we're going to use the option that says 0. The reason it's 0 is because our x-intercept is when y is 0. Okay, and it's going to place my cursor where it was the last time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually scoot all the way down towards one of my x-intercepts, because you can only find one at a time. I'm going to put it about where it is. So this says I'm at about negative 3.6. Okay, and 3.4 is my y value, because I know I'm up a little bit. So if I go down, now I'm probably even closer. So right around negative 4, but it's going to ask me the same questions, go left or right. I can move my cursor to the left, hit enter, move it to the right, but I'm just going to pick a point to the left of negative 4, so I'm going to say negative 5. Okay, and I'm going to pick one to the right of negative 4, say negative 3. Okay, and then I'm going to hit enter for guess, and it's going to tell me that I have an x-intercept, and the reason I know it's x-intercept because my y is 0 at negative 4, comma 0. So it did all the work for me. Now, there's going to be times where your calculator doesn't say 0 here. It's going to give you some really weird number with an E. Okay, it's because the calculator can't get exactly 0, but it gives you like an e to the negative large number, which if you remember from scientific notation would be a really, really, really tiny decimal. So sometimes you won't see an exact 0, like I said, sometimes you'll see an extremely small scientific number, which is equivalent to 0 for our purposes. So right now I know one of my x-intercepts is negative 4, 0. But I want to find my next y-intercept. So what I'm going to do is just move my cursor over to where the next one is just to get it set up. Okay, I'm going to go back into my second trace. I'm going to go back to 0. Okay, oops, didn't like that I moved it. Okay, we'll move it after the fact. So I'm going to move my cursor now all the way back over. And this is the tedious part. You're going to have to wait for it. So move it all the way over. There are some shortcuts for moving this, but I'll get to that later. All right, so I'm now going to move my cursor again close to this one just so I can get an idea of what my value is. This is about 32, but it wants a number to the left of it. So what's a number less? I'm going to say maybe 30. Okay, and what's a number bigger? Let's say 35. Okay, and now I'm going to hit enter to guess. And I got an exact 0 at 32, comma 0. Now they don't have to be nice numbers. I actually just completely randomly made up that equation, but everything's working out nice and pretty. So we get 32, comma 0 as another x-intercept. And again, if you had decimals for it, you would just write down the decimal approximation. Okay. How do you find the y value if you know an x value? So what if I knew x was, let's say 0 in this case? Isn't that how we want to find the y-intercept? Now we already know the y-intercept, but what if I know the x but want to find the y? Well, we're going to go back into our calculate menu, second trace, and now we're going to use value. Value stands for what is the x value. So they're going to ask, what is your x value? Well, what if I want to find the y-intercept? I could put 0 in for x. And that tells me, oh, when I put 0 in for x, I get 32. Well, what if I wanted to do any other number? What if I know the y is, say, 10? If I hit enter, it'll substitute it into this equation and tell me, well, if you substitute a 10, you get 77. It does all the math for you instantly. And that's all you have to do. So how do you find the x value if you know a y value? Now this is a little bit trickier. Okay, so how do you know how to do that? So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to y equals, because that's the only place I can type in what a y value is. And what I'm going to do is go down to y2, because you can enter up to, I believe, 10 depending on what calculator you have. So I'm going to say, what about a y of, say, 20? Okay, I want to know what x is when y is 20. So I'm going to go to y and enter in that I want it to be 20. I'm going to go back to my graph, and y equals 20, hopefully remember, is a horizontal line. So what it does is it draws a horizontal line. And this one happens to intersect two places, one here on the left, one here on the right. So if I want to find where this line intersects my parabola, I'm going to go to second, trace to my calculator. I'm going to go to the fifth option. You can either scroll down or go to number 5, and I'm going to find out where it intersects. So now that I have two graphs on here, left and right moves my cursor left and right. Up and down moves my cursor from one graph to the other. And it's much quicker to go on a straight line. So I'm going to find this intersection point on the right. Now I don't have to go left and right. All I'm going to do is put my cursor on the intersection point that I want. And it's going to ask me 3 questions. Is this one of your curves? Yes. Is this your other curve? Yes. And guess. You're always going to hit enter 3 times. The reason it asks how many, which curve you're on, quote unquote curve, is because you can type in more than just 2 equations. If there were, say, 4 different lines or curves graphed, they'd want to make sure that you're picking the right 2 to intersect. Now, if you notice here, I get an intersection of 29.620499, and we know the y should be 20. So I would have to write this out, but this is kind of a nasty number. You know, if we were doing this by hand, we would get either a fraction or a radical or something like this. Well, what the calculator just did is it stored this value in x. So let's go back to our home screen. I'm going to hit second, quit. If I hit the x button and hit enter, there's the number that the calculator just figured out for me. Let's see if the calculator can change it to a fraction. If I go to math and hit fraction, it didn't. What that means, it's an irrational number. This number, the exact place where they intersect, cannot be written as a fraction, so you would be able to round this to it's a decimal approximation. But that's a way where you can actually have the calculator even do the simplifying for you. Okay, so let me clear that. Let's go back to the graph. Now let's find this intersection point. So I'm going to go back to second trace. I'm going to go to intersect. I'm going to go on the line, and I'm going to scroll all the way over to find out, well, where does this happen? Because if I actually substitute a value for y and solve for x, you should realize that we're going to get 2 values, because at some point, remember, I have x squared. I'm going to have to take the square root. So now I have this point. I'm going to enter 3 times, and it gives me a point at negative 1.620499, comma 20. Okay, and again, the y should always be 20, because I'm asking what does x equal when y is 20. So let's go back to my home screen. Now if I hit x, if you notice it put in that new number. If I hit math fraction, again, this one doesn't. Sometimes they will, and then if it did, you could write down the actual fraction answer, which is exact, instead of having to round. Okay. Hopefully you feel a little bit better about how to use your graphing calculator to find the important information about any quadratic function. The next time we're in class, we're going to spend a lot of time going through lots of examples to have you answer different questions, just being able to use the different functions and the manipulations that we just went through.